"Oh, you don't want to fly the SR-71?" And I said, "No, sir, I do." And he goes, "Well, I was just getting ready to call you. Congratulations." That's how I found out. We're in the supersonic corridor. Have you ever been supersonic down low? And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Let's do it." And I'm like, "Okay." The low fuel light's just staring. It's burning a hole in my forehead. I thought we were going to have to punch out of a perfectly good airplane out over the desert. The last Air Force mission, me and Ocho flew that on October 10th, 1997.
What's up, everybody? I'm Adam. You're watching the Model Aviator channel, and we are here with Bert Garrison. Those of you that are aviation savvy may know who Bert is. Bert is the last man to fly a mission in the SR-71 Blackbird, and he is an avid modeler, a team pilot for Elite Aerosports. And we've got him here for an interview. Bert, thank you so much, man.
My pleasure, Adam.
For doing this. It's great to have you.
You're my YouTube hero, so this is great.
Well, I think he needs to aim higher. But anyway, so let's get right to it. So, Bert, what or who inspired your aviation journey?
Well, I've liked airplanes since I was 5. Mm-hmm. And we lived in San Diego, California. And back then, that would have been 66, 65, 66. Aviation was huge in San Diego. General Dynamics plant was there. My dad was a contractor on the Atlas missile program for General Electric.
Wow.
Yeah. But he was just a worker bee, but he loved airplanes.
Yep.
So he built models and he hung them over my crib when I was really young, which probably had some subliminal kind of play in the whole airplane thing. But we used to go to the Air and Space Museum. Like, I'd beg him, take me to the museum. And we'd go to that San Diego Balboa Park Air and Space Museum. And we were on approach to Montgomery Field, so I'd see airplanes come over the house and run outside. So from a very young age, I'd have to say I was interested in aviation, and my dad had a lot to do with that.
That is awesome. I've got a similar story, so I can relate. That's very cool. So, how long have you been flying models and full scale?
Well, if we keep going on the dad story, when I was still 5, 6 years old, we'd go to the park and fly control liners. As I'm sure everybody that's a model guy has probably dabbled in control line. Maybe not the younger modelers, but anybody that remembers Cox airplanes. So he'd hold me up and I would put my hand on his and pretend like I was flying. So I've been flying since I was 5. Now, on my own, I did control line when I was 8. I remember he would let me go with my buddy and we'd fly in the schoolyard on my own. And then I used to lay in bed dreaming of airplanes without strings on them. And that was radio control. So that would have been in the 70s, 71, 72 or so. By 1974, and I noticed you have a Craft radio up there. Craft radio was fairly affordable, still $380 for a 5-channel radio.
Right.
And so I cut grass and paid half, and Dad paid the other half. And so 74 is when I got into radio control. And I, for the life of me, can't remember this airplane that I had, but a friend of my father gifted him this kit that wasn't finished. And I'll describe it. Maybe some of the viewers will leave in the comments. But it was a shoulder wing, a trainer, had strip ailerons, but the wings, if you remember Lanier models that had that hard plastic over foam, that...
Yeah.
So it had that kind of wing, but everything else was slab balsa, slab side, square box, shoulder wing, canopy on top, sort of like a...
There were a dozen airplanes very much like that.
Exactly.
You know, like a cleaner version of an ugly stick.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and it had a canopy, and but I remember the motor. I will never forget the motor. It was a KMB 40. With a pericarb, and it had that Simcoe flow-through muffler. Mm-hmm. And so the motor came with the linkage that adjusted the baffle when you didn't have a motor on it.
Right.
So that when you were in idle, it would close down, and when you push the power up, the linkage would open that baffle up on the exhaust port.
Yeah.
Well, that all had to come out, and they had these little aluminum plugs. And this is why I remember this, because I'd play around with that thing and lose those plugs, and there would be hell to pay, because you had to have those plugs to plug the holes.
Right.
And then the strap, one of those radiator style, what the name of those clamps that you screw, the little worm drive screw clamp thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the same thing you put around a hose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what held the muffler onto the K&B. And then the pericarburetor, if you just looked at it in the grass, it would clog up with some kind of sliver, and you'd have to pull it apart at the field and clean it. But that's what I learned to fly on. So 1974 was the first time I flew an RC airplane.
That it's interesting. I got this huge smile when you said K&B 40. My first airplane was a SIG Cadet Mark 1 with a K&B 40 that didn't run worth a crap. So I can relate.
But you know, we didn't know any better, really. We didn't really. I mean, there were
Right.
guys that could afford European motors, and they were the rich guys at the field,
Yeah.
and they.
Well, I mean, OS Max. Once I discovered
And
OS Max, I
Japanese,
never
yeah.
looked back. And
Same,
they actually
same.
ran good. But-
Absolutely the same.
So, what year did you start learning to fly full scale?
Full scale was 76. So 2 years later, I was in a Boy Scout troop, and there was an older guy who was an explorer guy, and he was taking flying lessons, and I wanted to be a pilot. You know, that's all I wanted to do. And he goes, well, you should come down and rent the Citabria and learn to fly. And my uncle, who was a pilot, he said, yeah, you should, don't learn to fly in a tricycle gear. You need to learn to fly a tail dragger.
Conventional, yeah.
Conventional gear. So I went down to this FBO at Greenville downtown, Greenville, South Carolina, and they had a program called the Blue Sky Program. It was $260 to solo. And I was working at a Po Folks and a Pizza Inn.
Like 10 grand now.
Yeah, right? And I went in with my $260, and I said, I want to sign up. I was 16. I want to sign up for the Blue Sky Program. And I don't even remember having to have like your parents or anything sign. It was just, you know, it's a different world back then.
Well, I mean, most adults were trustworthy.
Yeah. So I went there, and the guy's like, the chief pilot's like, oh, okay. I said, but I want to fly the Citabria. And he gets on the calculator, and it's like, you know, one of those big calculators with the tape. He's like,
10 key. Yeah.
okay, we can do that. What he was doing was seeing if he was going to lose money, because the Warrior was renting for so much an hour,
Right.
and the Citabria was renting for so much an hour. So it ended up being $20 wet for the Citabria in 1975, 76.
That's crazy.
I think I started in 75, and it carried over my birthday 76 in April,
Yeah.
and then that's when I could officially
It wasn't
sell
that
it.
much more in the 80s when I was learning to fly.
True.
I mean, so when it comes to the model aviation, any idea how many models you have in your collection?
How many models do I have, or how many do I fly on a regular basis? I'm
Probably
looking
another
around
question.
here, and Adam's got he's almost like me. We've got quite a few airplanes, but
Too many.
I only, there's a couple go-tos that I take out and fly, but I don't know, probably 30 if I were to give a number of
Yeah.
airplanes, maybe 35. A lot of foamies, a lot of E-Flight UMX stuff, because I like it. It's in a box, you just put it away,
Yeah.
get it out of the way.
Yeah,
But yeah,
30. That's pretty conservative.
yeah, you got me beat, I'm sure.
Yeah,
That's not bad. There's nothing wrong.
By a
There's
little bit.
absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I mean, if you get a habit of an addiction, airplanes is not bad.
Yeah.
I've had worse
Yeah.
addictions, just saying.
yeah.
So, of all your models, what's your favorite?
So, as you know, it's a hard thing to answer, right? Because
That's why I love asking other people.
what's my favorite sailplane? What's my favorite? Because I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But in the last 3 years, I've been nose to the grindstone in jet turbine airplanes. And if I were to go, what's your favorite jet? It would be the the Elite Aerosports BDX, the big BDX.
Yeah.
Love that airplane.
Yeah.
I saw that airplane being flown at Jets
So
over Kentucky.
smooth.
It's just,
Slows
I'm not
down
a-
to a crawl.
I'm not balls to the wall. Everybody thinks because I was an SR guy, they're like, you don't like flying fast? I'm like, no, I like enjoying, keeping the thing in front of me and seeing it, not these high-speed passes.
Yeah.
So I watched Ali Machinchi. I didn't know him very well at the time, but he was flying it at jets over Kentucky, and I told my dad, he's with me, I said, that looks like a BD-5J.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked over, and he was pushing it back, and I go, that looks like a BD-5. He's like, close. It's called the BDX,
mm-hmm.
the BD-10. And anyway, long story short, I ended up buying his BDX and absolutely love that airplane. It's a great flying airplane. Then I've got foamies. My go-to foamy is the T-28. The big T-28 Carbon Z.
That's such a good flying
It's such a good flying airplane, and you can take that to a Warbird event, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And I know people that have won scale foamy class with that airplane.
Yeah.
So mine has a fake radial and a sound system in it. I love that airplane.
Nice.
And then I have some sailplanes, because I do giant scale sailplanes, and my favorite sailplane of my collection is my Tomahawk Fox, MDM Fox aerobatic glider. It's like your 3000 FMS.
Just way better.
Well,
way lighter.
It is. It's extremely light. In fact, we made a weighted wing tube for it just to get more speed.
Yeah.
But I love that airplane. It has just this endurance that you wouldn't believe. There's lots of videos on it. But so that kind of rounds up my favorites.
That's cool. Very cool. So how did you end up going? We're going back to full scale now. How did you end up an SR-71 driver? Because that is a elite and small group of people.
So, yeah, and I can't tell you how many people said it wasn't going to happen. And I only throw that out in case some of those people are watching. But I didn't care. So remember, I told you I got turned down by Southwest Airlines in '96.
Right.
So I was deflated because I'm in the Air Force, and I have to go do a job, and it's going to have to be a desk job at my point in my career if I don't find something else.
Yeah.
So I was in what's called the Functional Check Flight FCF unit of the T-43 squadron. So that's the guys that go and test fly airplanes after they've been rebuilt. So we'll take them up, shut down motors, and check control rigging and all that. And Pat Falterman, a good friend of mine, was the chief of FCF. And I'm sitting there, I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs. And as a joke, he walks in and he slides this piece of paper across the desk. And I go, what's that? And I look at it, and it's a job announcement. They're looking for applicants for the SR-71. He's like, there you go, you can go do that. And I went,
sure,
maybe I can. And I looked at the requirements, and I met all the requirements.
Outstanding.
So you had to build a package. If any of the viewers have ever been in the Air Force where they have you got the folder, you open it up and your pictures on one side and then your resume and then all your accomplishments. I had to build all that and send it out to Edwards Air Force Base. And I sent it off and I didn't hear anything and I didn't hear anything and I didn't hear anything, and I'm like, oh, they're not interested in me. So I called, so another buddy said, hey, they're looking for U-2 pilots. And so I went, I should just have my package sent over to the U-2 group because it's the same package. Yep. So I called the squadron, the detachment, Edwards, and Colonel Goodmanson, Stan Goodmanson, answers the phone. It's Colonel Goodmanson. I said, yes, sir. I go, this is Bert Garrison. I applied to the SR program and I haven't heard anything. So I'm guessing it's a no. I'd like to have my package sent over to the U-2 squadron. And he goes, oh, you don't want to fly the SR-71? And I said, no, sir, I do. And he goes, well, I was just getting ready to call you. Congratulations. That's how I found out. Wow. So I was like, thank you, sir. Of course, then I'm walking around like, yes. When I got my orders, I went to my commander, because he's one of the ones that Cheslak, I'm trying to remember his first name, sir, but he was like, yeah, good luck, Garrison. And anyway, so I went into his office with the orders, and I reported in, and I'm like, here, sir. And he's like, what? I said, yes, sir, I got the SR-71. He's
That
like, I'll
is-
be damned.
That is outstanding.
So that's how that all came about.
That is cool. And you don't make a claim to fame, but a lot of us really look up to you for being the last man to fly a mission in an SR-71. How did you end up being that guy? And tell us about that last
Okay,
mission.
so first of all, I want to make sure the record is straight, because there will be people that'll watch this and they'll go, he's not the last guy. NASA flew it to Oshkosh. So NASA was a separate entity and they had their own airplanes. And when they stood down the Air Force program, I was the last. Me and Domingo Ocho Terrena, we call him Ocho, great guy. He was my backseater.
Mm-hmm.
We were going on one of our last qualification missions to be qualified to take the airplane and go do full-scale missions overseas with it. And that was October 10th of 97. And Ted Carlson, world-famous aviation photographer, he was scheduled to be there. Nobody knew this was the last flight. Okay, it just happened that was the time, and so Blair Bozak was one of the RSOs at the detachment, and he was a photographer, and he knew Ted, and he invited Ted out and sponsored Ted to come do. One of the guys flew him in the T-38, so they flew formation with us and took pictures until we were going too fast to stay with us.
Right.
So that was a godsend, because there would be no documentation of the last flight of the SR-70, Air Force SR-71.
Yeah.
NASA only flew it 2 more times, and then they scrapped theirs. But the last Air Force mission, me and Ocho flew that on October 10th, 1997. And Ted Carlson took pictures, photographs of us taking off, refueling. Then we did the Excel maneuver, and then once we went through Mach 1, the T-38 couldn't keep up anymore. It's burning too much gas and too much drag. And then when we came back, we coordinated, and they came up and met us. And then we got pictures in the break over top of Edwards and in the landing. It was awesome. But we didn't, at that time, we still didn't know it was the last flight. Wow. So the next week, I'm scheduled to fly. Me and Ocho are scheduled to fly on our last mission to be mission ready and be total mission ready pilots and our crew. And I'm sitting in the recliner. They had these recliners that had the built-in oxygen and suit cooling thing, so because you're all suited up. Mm-hmm. You got your helmet on, and you're sitting there just kind of chilling while they're getting the jet ready. And Jay, Colonel, oh man, I can't remember his last name. Really nice guy, but he was a former wing commander turned Lockheed employee when he got out. Okay. And he was the program manager for the SR. He walks in, and I lifted my visor up, and I'm like, hey, sir. And he's like, he does the cut sign. And I go, oh. First of all, it's unusual to see the program manager in the shoot shop, in the life support shop. I said, is the plane broken? He goes, no, they canceled the program.
Wow.
That is exactly how I found. So I went from this elation of getting the job to this, are you effing kidding me?
Yeah.
They just killed us like that? And that's how it ended. And we never flew the airplane again. Although they strung us along for 6 months, and we would go over to NASA and fly the simulator every day just in case it came back. And we flew the T-38 every day. But they pushed our airplanes out into the off the ramp, even into the dirt of the desert there at Contractors Row, and to add salt to the wound, they moved the F-22 Raptor program into our hangar. That's when I knew it was over.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's how I got into the U-2, though.
Man, that is interesting. Well, being in that environment, the high altitude, the high speeds, and you flew the U-2 as well.
After the SR.
After the SR. You probably have experienced some pretty scary situations in airplanes. What is the scariest situation you've ever been in a full-scale plane?
Well, 2. Believe it or not really the U-2 or the SR-71, but back in the F-111 days as a right-seater, we were at Red Flag, and my pilot, who was a good guy, but he was kind of, you throw caution to the wind kind of dude. He was a captain. I was a second lieutenant. And he's like, hey, we're in the supersonic corridor. Have you ever been supersonic down low? And I'm like, no. He's like, let's do it. And I'm like, okay. So we go down.
Sounds like fun.
We're 400 feet off the deck in the F-111, and he puts full afterburner in, and we're, twiddling our thumbs. It's because it takes forever to get through the Mach at 400 feet above the ground. So we're probably, MSL above sea level is probably 2,000-ish or so. I don't remember what the desert floor is up there in Edwards, but we're cruising along. All of a sudden, you don't feel anything when you go through the Mach. The gauges all jump. If you've seen Wright stuff, it's kind of that same kind of deal.
Yeah.
There's no like all of a sudden the airplane's buffeting. And a master caution light comes on. The master caution light's the light that alerts you there's something out of your view that's lit up. And I'm the guy that runs the checklist and monitors. So I look down and I see low fuel.
Oh, wow.
And
that's that, an airplane you can dead stick.
So that light, I can't remember. I think it came on at 20. I don't remember what it comes on. But I'm going to tell you, it's not a lot of fuel. And I said, low fuel. And he's like, oh, crap. And he grabs the afterburner, because we're still in afterburner. He wants to see how fast it'll go. And he pulls the power back, and it's like we hit a wall. Because the drag comes on instantly, and we're both thrown forward in the seat. And I push myself back. And I'm like, we got to climb, conserve, confess. Those are the 3 rules of any low fuel situation. Mm-hmm. And he did none of those. And I'm the young guy, and I'm like, we got to climb, dude. We got to climb. He's like, oh. So he climbs up, and then we go out, and we call to tell them we're ready to return to base, RTB. And they know we're an F-111, and they know we got tons of gas. That's the standard. We always come in last. And I said, dude, no, we got to tell them we're running low on fuel. And he wouldn't tell them. And
so you wouldn't declare an emergency?
No. He goes, we'll be in quickly. They kept bypassing us. We're in this holding pattern over Peanut Lake. If anybody's a former Air Force or Navy or any red flag, they'll know Peanut Lake. And we're in a holding pattern over Peanut Lake, which as the crow flies, I think is 30 miles from the end of the runway. Wow. But the low fuel light's just staring. It's burning a hole in my forehead. I thought we were going to have to punch out of a perfectly good airplane out over the desert, but that's not the worst of it. I'll hurry the story up. So then I make the decision, because they always say, if you can't get the guy to cooperate with you, just take the radio and make the call. Then he's helping.
Then he's got to do it.
So I said, hey, there's a formation of F-16s above us waiting their turn, and they got cleared in. And I just keyed the mic, and I don't remember their call sign. A Falcon 2-5 flight. This is whatever we were. We'd like to join on your right wing. We're low fuel. And he said, join us 4 or whatever he said. And then now he's like, so we climb and we join up with them, and we're going in now.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I was pretty savvy I was into this aviation thing and risk management, and I said, all we have to do is when they're going to go to initial and they're going to pitch out in a fan, and we're going to be at the back, and I don't want to flame out over downtown old Las Vegas. So I said, all we got to do is just drop down and do a straight in. We're off the runway before the first guy pitches. And he says, no, Bert, the overhead pattern's the most fuel efficient pattern. And he is right, unless you're 4 in a 4-ship, because you're going to be breaking last, and you got to wait for all those guys. So you're out there dirty, burning lots of gas, trying to keep your spacing as you come back around. And I just knew we were going to flame out. So that's the scaredest I've ever been, thinking we're going to flame out and make the news in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Worse, hitting old, downtown, or on downwind there out in the desert,
where
everybody can see.
There's no getting that much egg off your face if you run out of gas and have to punch out of a perfectly good multi-million-dollar jet.
So the end of the story is we're taxiing back, and the nose gear's not responding. So anybody who's flown a model that's way tail heavy, maybe relied on fuel to keep it in the nose. So he's using differential braking, and we pull into the parking spot, and the guy goes like this, and when the airplane lurches, the nose wheel comes off the ground like 3 feet, and then settles back down, and the crew chief puts the ladders up for us, and he goes, "How much gas do you guys have?" And I just pointed at him. I didn't say anything because I was just... So they knew, and then he eventually, unfortunately, because of his cavalier... He wasn't really cavalier. He was just happy-go-lucky and didn't really do risk management. He ended up losing his wings, not for that incident, but for more. And he was a nice guy, but he was not meant to be a pilot.
So what would your message be to young people that want to get into aviation?
Follow your dream. If you want to become a pilot, follow your dream. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Learn everything you can about becoming a pilot. There's all kinds of resources available now. There is a pilot shortage. Now is the best time. So follow your dream. Don't let anybody tell you you can't, and go for it. Also, model aviation is a great segue into full-scale aviation. I think Adam would agree with that.
Absolutely.
You learn a lot about aerodynamics. You learn a lot about attention to detail.
Yep.
All that stuff plays heavily into a full-scale pilot.
Yep, absolutely. And finally, Bert has a YouTube channel, Bert Garrison RC. Tell us about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, Bert Garrison RC was started January 1st this year, 2025. It's an event style, so I'm doing more event footage like jets over Kentucky, whatever, just flying. And I'm concentrating on takeoffs and landings and cool things, not just a bunch of dead air flying around. So go check it out. It's Bert Garrison RC is the channel, Bert with an E, B-E-R-T. Please subscribe.
Yep. We'll put a link in the description to Bert's channel, and I'll have Ivy stick one up right here. So yeah, subscribe to Bert's channel, and we actually have a unique opportunity to spend entire day together hanging out. So the interview is on our channel, obviously, and all the flying that we're about to go do together is going to be on Bert's channel. So be sure and check that out. So Bert, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks, Adam.
It was great to have you. That's it for us. Take care of yourselves. Happy flying. We'll see you next week with something cool with wings.
Thanks for watching.